Hi, everyone. This is Wes Fryer in Charlotte, North Carolina for Heal Our Culture. Today is Sunday, March the 1st, 2026, and it's about 7:45 p.m. And I want to share an update. And so I have put together a few slides, and it does seem like the world is on fire, and the world is on fire in many ways. And I have been working on this project, Heal Our Culture, for a while. And tonight I want to talk about number one, finding hope. And I'm not saving that till the end because I think it is so important that we keep the light on and we maintain hope amidst a crazy news feed. If you happen to watch television or check social media, I want to talk briefly about war in Iran. And I want to give you a tool for your toolbox if you don't already have it for fact checking claims that are flying around about this war. And I also want to talk about unchristian nationalism and give a podcast recommendation to you. I think it's unfortunate we're calling this movement Christian nationalism because it really is not anything to do with Christianity other than the fact that it's trying to hijack Christianity. So it's unchristian nationalism. I want to talk a little bit about DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion in scouting. And I lastly want to talk about AI military ethics. And I don't want to take too much of your time, but let's begin with hope because this is so important. So one of the ways that I found hope today is I had a chance to go to the Brighter Day Community Choir concert here in Charlotte. My friend and colleague David Harris sings in this choir, and he invited my spouse and I to go, and it was just absolutely uplifting. It was actually a long day of church because we went to our normal church, Caldwell Presbyterian Church in Charlotte, and went to Sunday school and the service. And so anyway, we really did get church, but boy, was it ever incredible to be in the midst of so many singing and hopeful and joyous people in Charlotte. And so I want to encourage you to find community wherever you happen to be. I want to also encourage us to listen to wise voices. And I had a chance today to put, before actually our Sunday school class, this little web page together that shares 4 sermons that were shared from the pulpit of our church, Caldwell Presbyterian, this last month because it was Black History Month. And if you haven't noticed, and if you don't know this, there are so many valuable lessons that we can learn from folks, I don't know why that went away, who have experienced oppression and difficult times before, and certainly our African-American brothers and sisters who have struggled for civil rights, who have struggled to be able to maintain their hope through chattel slavery, through Jim Crow, through just so many different things, and the rollback that we see now to civil rights, the suppression of voting, the explicit targeting of our colleagues of color in the military, in government service. It's just really a horrific time for a lot of things. And I find such hope in the voices of leaders, and especially our African-American brothers and sisters. So you can check that out. I have a website, followjesus.wesfryer.com. By the way, Heal Our Culture is not a project that is faith-based. I do believe in my faith, and I'm a follower of Jesus, and I'm not quiet about that. But I believe that we find hope in all kinds of different ways, and we are a multi-ethnic, diverse, we have been representative democracy here in the United States. We are a diverse country, and we need to heal our culture and serve as we can as culture healers, not culture warriors. And so anyway, I've been sharing lessons from adult Sunday school classes that I've taught and things like that on that followjesus.wesfryer.com site. And at the top, or you can just go to Black-History. You can click the Black History link at the top and you can find that. Okay, let's talk about war in Iran. So the State of the Union address was this past week, and it was for over 2 hours. It set a record, and until well into the first hour, our president did not address the situation in Iran. But yesterday, on Saturday, February 28th, 2026, the United States unleashed overwhelming firepower, mainly through the air, with a variety of different military platforms. And that resulted not only in the killing of the supreme leader of Iran and reportedly other leaders in Iran, but also retaliatory strikes that Iran sent against other targets in the Middle East. And this is just a Google search for the word Iran. And I'm sure if you've been watching the news, you have been seeing all kinds of headlines and video about the war in Iran. And so there's a whole lot of things that I could say about this. But what I want to say just briefly is please be aware that we are being targeted. And in some cases, we're also just seeing in our news feed from our friends and our former teachers and from all kinds of folks a variety of misinformation and disinformation and things that are just flat out not true. And I want to show you something that could possibly help. Not that we can sit here and fact check everything that is in our news feed, but a former teacher of mine shared this meme in her Facebook feed today. I happened to see it, and I'll just read this. It says, "Remember how we got here?" And there's pictures of Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden. And it says, "Hillary Clinton supplied Iran with uranium to enrich their nuclear program." And it says, "Barack Obama gave Iran $1.7 billion that they used to fund their nuclear program." And it says, "Joe Biden unfroze over $16 billion of funds for Iran, so don't even blame this on Trump." Using a few tools, I created a counterfactual that says at the top, let's get the facts right. Clinton negotiated sanctions against Iran's nuclear program. The uranium claim is false. It confuses an unrelated Russia deal she didn't personally approve. The second box says the $1.7 billion was Iran's own money from 1979, returned after legal arbitration. It coincided with a deal that cut Iran's enriched uranium by 98%. And then the third box says the $6 billion was refrozen before Iran spent any of it. The remaining $10 billion waiver began under Trump and was renewed 23 times under both parties. Context matters. Check your sources. So how in the heck can we fact check in this crazy world of speed of light transmissions? The fact that you're able to watch this is pretty cool, right? Because I'm just at my house in my office recording this, and I don't know where you are in time or space. The internet is powerful, and I'm so glad that these technologies have matured to the point where we do have the opportunity to publish and share content. But misinformation and disinformation is really rampant, and it's in many ways getting worse because artificial intelligence is amplifying that. So let me reshare my screen here, and I'll show you how I basically fact checked this meme. So there is a wonderful tool that a gentleman by the name of Mike Caulfield has created, and I'm on faculty for the Media Education Lab. And back in November of 2025, and I'll include a link to this, I hosted a webinar we called Fact Checking with AI Super Prompts, and you can watch the whole thing. It was from November 3rd. But the bottom line is this is a super prompt that Mike Caulfield, who's a researcher at the University of Washington at the Center for an Informed Public, it's 338 lines long. And what the link is the fact check of this entire claim. So it takes that image, verifies facts that are related to it, identifies errors and corrections, giving a confidence interval for those, and then summarizes the corrections, which is basically in that counterfactual meme that I showed you there. It also provides some potential leads to the meme source and to some of the sources, and then it also assesses the usefulness of different sources on this topic. It gives a revised summary. I'm going to just go ahead and read this to you. It says, this meme makes 3 distinct claims about Democratic politicians enabling Iran's nuclear program. All 3 are either false or missing critical context. And actually, let me say something before I go through this. I'm not under an illusion that providing counterfactuals like this is going to sway the opinion of my former middle school teacher who shared this, or my own father, who I think is fairly enamored with President right now, and with a lot of folks that have absolutely, they're on the MAGA train. Okay, they're on the train that believes that what our president is doing right now, and I'm not even actually going to talk in this I didn't put a slide up about the $20 billion that ICE and Border Patrol are spending right now to create detention facilities, which amount to concentration camps in our country right now. Okay, counterfactuals, I don't think are going to solve this. Part of the reason I'm recording this video is because I think we need to become better storytellers and better communicators. And we need to take a look at what those who have advanced a very far right agenda of political and cultural change in this country have done. And we need to, this is part of healing our culture. Okay. So I'm not thinking that, oh my gosh, I'm sharing you these facts and this is going to suddenly convince everyone. It's not. But I think it's pretty powerful to consider this. So the Clinton claim is false. Hillary Clinton did not supply Iran with uranium. As Secretary of State, she led efforts to impose the toughest ever international sanctions on Iran, explicitly to prevent Iran from deploying nuclear weapons. That's from the American Presidency Project. She later played a role in laying the groundwork for the JCPOA, which allowed Iran to maintain limited monitored enrichment. The meme appears to conflate this with the entirely separate Uranium One controversy, a debunked claim about uranium mined in the U.S. being sold to a Russian company, not Iran, via a unanimous 9-agency government approval process in which Clinton was one vote. And that comes from PolitiFact and from Wikipedia. On the Obama claim, it says the Obama claim has a kernel of truth that is slightly distorted. The $1.7 billion transfer is real. It was conducted in cash, a fact that drew genuine controversy at the time, but it was the return of Iran's own money, $400 million Iran had deposited in a U.S. arms trust fund before the 1979 revolution, plus a $1.3 billion in interest accumulated during decades of legal arbitration at The Hague. That's according to the Brookings Institute. There is no documented evidence that Iran used those funds for nuclear development, and the payment coincided with JCPOA implementation day when Iran's enriched uranium stockpile was reduced by 98% and international inspectors gained unprecedented access. And again, there's the source, the Center for Arms Control. The final claim, the Biden claim, says it's the most nuanced. The $16 billion figure is technically assembled from real numbers, but it obscures more than it reveals. The $6 billion component was Iran's own frozen oil revenues moved from South Korea to Qatar for humanitarian use, refrozen after October 7th before Iran spent any of it. The $10 million component is a sanctions waiver for Iraqi energy payments that was first issued in 2018 under President Trump and renewed approximately 23 times by both administrations. And that's from Snopes and factcheck.org. No U.S. taxpayers were involved in either case. Again, I am not under an illusion that fact-checking with an AI super prompt like this is going to miraculously solve our problems, but I find it extremely useful to have a tool like this that I can use to check facts and claims, because this is the world we're living in. And disinformation and misinformation isn't new. It just moves a lot faster and it is a lot more sophisticated. And so perhaps that is a tool that you can have in your toolbox that's going to be helpful to you. And I am not sure why my screen continues to switch. Perhaps it's because my lovely spouse would like me to make dinner tonight instead of sitting here recording a video. All right, let me try to get through this. So number 3, let's talk about unchristian nationalism. I'm going to speak a little about DEI and scouting, and it's going to relate directly to the culture war, which is ongoing in so many facets of our society today. And I think I'm going to start calling it unchristian nationalism, because it is false to call this Christian nationalism. I want to recommend to you a wonderful podcast, which is called Straight White American Jesus, specifically the episode from February 27th, 2026. And these authors and professors do such a good job unpacking why it is that people like Secretary of Defense, I'm not going to say Secretary of War because Congress is the entity that established the Secretary of Defense in 1947 with the National Security Act, and they're the ones that can change that. People like Secretary Hegseth and others that are professing to be trying to return the United States to its Christian roots and doing all kinds of things in the name of Christianity are heretics, and they are not speaking for Jesus Christ, and they really should read the New Testament of the Bible, and they should pray for God's Holy Spirit, which I happen to believe is real, to share with them the truth of how God calls us to love our neighbors and to take care of the widows and the orphans and the immigrant. and basically follow the Sermon on the Mount, or from Matthew, from the Gospel of Matthew, and the Sermon on the Plain, as we heard a sermon about today from the Gospel of Luke. Great podcast, excellent episode. And I really do believe that part of what we need to do is reclaim our news feeds, because our news feeds and so many news feeds have been hijacked by, we've always had propaganda. Propaganda is not new, but there are so many outright lies today that are being presented as facts. And part of how we can heal our culture, we can start with ourselves, is by reclaiming our news feeds. And I'll tell you a little bit more about some ideas on that. Let's talk about DEI and scouting. So I come to you as an Eagle Scout myself, as a former Scoutmaster, an assistant Scoutmaster, a former Philmont Ranger. I love scouting, and our son is an Eagle Scout. My grandfather is an Eagle Scout. My dad would be an Eagle Scout, but there wasn't a swimming pool in Powell, Wyoming in the late 1950s, and he couldn't get the life-saving or swimming merit badge. Why am I talking about scouting? Amidst the war in Iran and all of this, which, of course, I don't know what the intention of our chief executive is, but I do know that the Epstein files are incredibly incriminating for him and for many other people who are, many of whom are still in power today. I do know that there's a lot of really bad stuff happening in our country. And so part of the playbook, if you will, of fascism is to overwhelm the news feed with shock and awe. And this is part of what's happening today to distract us. You might have missed this, but on February 27th, NPR had this article. It's titled, "Pentagon Puts Scouts on Notice Over DEI and Girl-Centered Policies." And it explains that Secretary Hegseth wants the Scouts of America, which has been renamed, to stop having girls and to return to be only Boy Scouts. The misogyny and racism, specifically of Secretary Hegseth, but also of our chief executive, our president today, is abhorrent. And these do not represent my values, and they do not represent the values of many others in our country. They represent the values of some, but I don't think they represent the values of a majority. And so there's a pause that's been put on this because, like I'm going to talk about with Anthropic and artificial intelligence and ethics of the Department of Defense, tried to give an ultimatum to scouts, and they've backed off slightly. But here's the background. After the murder of George Floyd, the scouting program established a Citizenship in Society merit badge. The leaders of the scouting program were trying to basically negotiate with Hegseth and the administration. And so they decided, and remember, scouting is a private organization. It is not a government organization. And it has a very rich heritage and history. Of course, it started in England with Baden-Powell. It's a global movement. They've decided to go ahead and discontinue this Citizenship in Society, and it's no longer going to be required for Eagle. And it's gone. It's gone. Starting on February 27th, 2 days ago, scouts could no longer work on that merit badge. And it's been a little while since I was a Scoutmaster. It's been a while since I was in scouting. But here's what I do know. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is good. And if you're against diversity, equity, and inclusion, what are you for? You're actually for racism, and you're for misogyny. That means sexist treatment of females. And you're most likely against people who identify not as cisgendered, folks that are part of our LGBTQ plus community. And so we are a diverse nation. I love scouting for so many reasons, the values that scouting teaches. And I just want to say on the record today, on March 1st, 2026, the leaders of the scouting program were not wrong to establish a Citizenship in Society. We need to talk about a variety of different issues, including issues of race and racism, and the ways in which we've gotten it wrong in a lot of cases. Colonialism was like a bad thing in a lot of ways. And it was bad that George Floyd was murdered. It's been slavery, the enslavement of African Americans who were brought against their will to the Americas and were enslaved. These things are bad. They were bad. But the treatment of the ways in which many people are treated, and today with ICE, I could go on and on. Look, if you happen to be connected to the scouting program, I encourage you to make your voice heard. And perhaps this can be reversed, okay? Because this kind of attempted negotiation with an immoral authority, which is exactly what Secretary Hegseth is the wrong approach, all right? So let's talk about AI and military ethics. This is an AP article from, I think, a day ago, and or maybe it was on the 27th. And the headline was that Trump orders U.S. agencies to stop using Anthropic technology and clash over AI safety. This was from last week. And basically, if Anthropic did not agree to give the U.S. Pentagon unfettered access to Claude, which is its model, we've got OpenAI has ChatGPT, Anthropic has Claude, we've got Grok by Elon, by AI, XAI, whatever, and DeepSeek is a Chinese. We've got these different models. DeepSeek's a Chinese model, Copilot by Microsoft. These are frontier models, and Amadei, who is the, I guess I can do this, Anthropic CEO, Amadei, explained, and this is a good video from CBS from a day ago. You can see it has already over 1 million views. He explained that the two guardrails that have not been crossed, but the ones that they wanted to enforce, is to keep humans in the loop when it comes to lethal weapons. In other words, we don't want AIs at this point, certainly, but we don't want AIs launching nuclear weapons. And we also don't want AIs to be used in mass surveillance of the folks in the United States, our people. And so this ultimatum that Secretary Hegseth gave basically now has meant that Anthropic is outlawed in U.S. government agencies, including the military, but also other agencies. Ethics are really important. And it is important that we also respect the ability for companies to have their own guidelines and rules. In many ways, the United States today has ended the post-World War II international order that was established following the end of World War II through the United Nations. The respect of sovereignty, just international law, it continues to be flouted in multiple ways. And so I think that this pressure that the Pentagon and Secretary Hegseth specifically put on Anthropic was immoral and wrong. I am glad to see Anthropic standing up. I actually a couple months ago, switched from paying for ChatGPT Pro, which I've used for a couple years, to Anthropic, to Claude. And the things that we do as consumers are important. So I would encourage you to support Anthropic, support Claude. It's also a great model, and we'll continue to track with this. All right, I got to wrap up because I think we need to eat dinner. I want to encourage you to join me in advocacy. I am sharing this video on my Heal Our Culture YouTube channel and my Heal Our Culture Substack, and I'll also put it on healourculture.org, which is the WordPress website that I've created, because I really do believe that I am called, and I invite you to join me in this, to serve as a culture healer and not a culture warrior, because there are so many folks today in our society who are culture warriors, and that's what you're going to see in the news feed. That's what you're going to hear them talking about. And there are lots and lots of things that are important to struggle for and to work for, but culture healing is what we need. And I'm hoping that maybe in the next year or so, I'll have a book about this, and I'll be able to articulate a little bit more the different ways. But I think we got to build community. We need to share our trusted voices like I've tried to do with you with some podcasts. I think we need to heal personally. There's a whole lot of different traumas and experiences that we've had, but we need to seek healing personally and in our relationships. And then I also believe we need to resist cooperatively. And so another project that I have, and it's a Substack and a website, is called Resist and Heal. And you can check that out. But all of those links you can find at wesfryer.com/advocacy. You can also take a look at some of the news that I'm reading and I recommend by going to the website I set up a few months ago with a little AI vibe coding project. And it's called It's just the address is news.wesfryer.com. You can see articles that I have flipped into my Flipboard, videos that I've done like this that are updates. And also you can just find the newsletter links that I subscribe to, because this website pulls them out and allows you to take a look at those. And then lastly, so important, I maybe should have shared this first, this week, please join me in the Thrive Conference, United for Democracy and Global Action. It is March 4th and 5th. That's Wednesday and Thursday this week. You can learn more and register at thriveedu.substack.com. The live sessions are free. You can pay a small fee that helps offset the costs that my colleague and buddy Lucy Gray, who is the primary organizer of this conference, incurs having this. And this is the first of what I think is going to be many conferences. We all can do different things to heal our culture. And here's one of the best things that I'll just leave you with as a thought, and that is we get to collaborate. It is absolutely freaking amazing that you are able to see this at all, right? Because the internet is here and it's matured, and we have fiber optic cable stretched across the ocean. And I don't know where you are in place or time, but I do know this. I know that we need to act to heal our culture. Where I live today in the United States, I'm living in a country that in some ways I hardly recognize. But I do know there are so many good people out in the world, and many of us are working together. We're collaborating to support the values that we believe in, which include the values of human rights, of representative democracy and self-determination, the separation of church and state. There's more, right? But we are working together. And so that Thrive Conference is a place and a way that you can connect with others. I'll be doing a session about reclaiming our news feeds. And I'll be telling a little bit of the background of how I've created some different websites that basically help me have a more curated and intentional feed of news, and how those kinds of things, we can create those individually, but we can also do those for the communities that we're a part of. I want to encourage you to maintain hope, keep the light on, and think about the ways that you can be a culture healer in your family, in your community, in your neighborhood, in our world. Take care. Bye.